Welcome back to our next set of notes, which is all about the cell membrane. And I know we've talked about this before, especially with everything that we've already done with cells and cell organelles. And we have a basic understanding of what the cell membrane is and what the cell membrane does. But now we're going to dive way deeper and get really into the specifics of how the cell membrane is so vital to our body's success. So, the function of the cell membrane is to be selectively permeable. And we know this already, right? We know that the cell membrane's main function is to allow certain things to come in and out of the cell. And the way that it does that is by being selectively permeable. It's also called semi-permeable, but basically what this whole thing means is that, you can kind of see it in this picture here, if this yellow thing is the cell membrane, these small purple dots and green dots and yellow dots, they can fit through these holes that are semi-permeable in the cell membrane, right? The cell membrane is selectively allowing certain materials to come through, but these red blood cells and these blue molecules, they're just too big to fit through, and so they're not going to be able to squeeze through these tiny little holes that are in the cell membrane. So it's keeping some things out and letting some things in. You also sort of saw this when we did our our poster drawing, when you had to draw out what the cell membrane looked like, and everyone was like, this isn't what the cell membrane looks like, there's so many parts. And there are a lot of parts in the cell membrane, and now you need to know what they are. So the main thing, what makes up most of the cell membrane is called a phospholipid bilayer. And you've heard part of this word before, lipid, right? We just talked about lipids. Lipids are fats, so this is made up of lipids, fatty acids, okay? So the phospholipid bilayer makes up the cell membrane, and it has two parts. The head, hydrophilic. Hydrophilic means that it likes water. So the head is always facing the outside because your body has a lot of water in it, and so it's facing the outside where water can kind of run along and it doesn't get scared of it. The tails, though, are hydrophobic, and those you can see are facing the inside. So they're facing in because they do not like water, right? Phobic is like fear, and so hydrophobic means water-fearing. And so these tails hide away from the outside of the cell membrane, and they stick just to the inside. So two phospholipids facing opposite directions make a bilayer, right? A bilayer means two layers, so two phospholipids facing opposite ways will make up the phospholipid bilayer, which is the cell membrane. Now, the cell membrane is known as a fluid mosaic model. And what that means is, if you're just breaking down this idea, fluid, you've heard of this, it's like water, it's very movable, it's not stuck in one place, it can move how it needs to move. And so the cell membrane is fluid, the individual components can move around. So all of these pieces that are like sticking up in various places within the phospholipids, they can move from place to place, they're not stuck there. And the cell membrane is mosaic because there's so many parts to it, and so it makes this really complex thing. This membrane is very complex with all of these different parts, right? Look at all of these little labels on this picture. And so fluid mosaic just means that there's lots of parts, and all of those parts can move around within the cell membrane. And the last thing that we're going to talk about are the parts of the cell membrane that we haven't talked about yet. So we know that most of this, like all these yellow dots with the like brown tail things, those are phospholipids, we know that. The other big things are proteins, so like this channel protein, which sort of looks like a hot dog bun, but like all these proteins, these big blue things that are kind of like around in here, they transport food and waste into and out of the cell. These are made for larger molecules that can't quite fit through the phospholipids, but could fit through this like slightly larger opening. Okay, and then the other thing is cholesterol, which are these green, I I don't know, circle worm things that you can see. So cholesterol is found between the phospholipid molecules. You can see that it's like in between the orange dots. They're not like, in the proteins or anything like that. They're in between the phospholipids, and it helps maintain stability and fluidity. So stability keeps it have a little bit more structure, but fluidity also allows some of the other pieces in there to move around as need be. Okay, so even though we've talked about the cell membrane before, this is a much deeper dive, and you will be responsible for all of these parts of the cell membrane and understanding how they work together to allow things in and out of the cell.